The soldiers of the 761st Tank Battalion were about to do something the world had never seen. They were young men, drafted from cities, towns, and farms across America. They were black, and in 1944, that fact alone meant they were treated as inferior. The U.S. Army was segregated. Black soldiers were often assigned menial tasks. They were not expected to fight in frontline combat. Some commanders doubted their courage, some doubted their skill, and many doubted whether they could even handle the complexities of tank warfare. Yet, despite the prejudice surrounding them, these men were about to step onto the stage of history, proving not only to the Germans but also to their own countrymen that bravery and skill know no color. When the 761st arrived in Europe, they were met with skepticism from every side. Allied officers raised eyebrows at the sight of black tank crews, some quietly questioning whether they were ready for the realities of modern war. German forces, hearing rumors of these American soldiers, openly mocked them. They laughed at the idea that black men could operate heavy tanks, coordinate complex attacks, and withstand the chaos of battle. To the enemy, it seemed absurd. To many at home, it seemed impossible. The stage was set for a story of defiance, courage, and relentless determination that would shake both prejudice and the battlefield itself. The battalion's nickname, the Black Panthers, was earned long before they ever faced the Germans. It came from their fierce fighting spirit during training, a spirit that refused to be crushed by discrimination or doubt. They trained relentlessly at Fort Knox, Kentucky, in the scorching summer heat and biting winter cold. Day after day, they learned to master the Sherman tank, coordinating its multiple crews under intense pressure. They practiced maneuvers, gunnery drills, and battlefield communication. Every exercise tested their patience, skill, and endurance. Yet what set them apart was not only their technical ability, but also their unwavering will. They carried with them a quiet promise. They would prove themselves not because anyone expected them to, but because they knew they could. The soldiers also carried the weight of history. They fought not only against Germany but against the harsh reality of racism in America. Many of them had grown up in segregated towns, attended separate schools, and faced limitations simply because of the color of their skin. In the Army, they were often assigned second-rate equipment and overlooked for promotions. Some white officers doubted their intelligence, some peers doubted their courage. Every drill, every exercise, every obstacle in training was a reminder that the world around them did not believe in them. But that disbelief became a fuel. It sharpened their focus, hardened their resolve, and turned their frustration into determination. When they finally shipped out to Europe, they arrived in a world that was just as unforgiving as the one they had left behind. The French countryside was scarred by years of fighting. Villages were empty, towns burned, and the signs of war were everywhere. The German army still controlled much of the territory ahead, and they were ruthless, experienced, and confident. The 761st Tank Battalion was about to enter this battlefield under the command of General George S. Patton, one of the most aggressive and demanding generals of the war. Patton valued speed, surprise, and bold action, and he was about to test these men in ways that would push them to their limits. The Germans, unaware of what was coming, expected an easy fight. They mocked the new arrivals. "Colored soldiers," they sneered. "They will never last in combat." But the 761st had trained for this moment. They had endured ridicule, discrimination, and doubt, and now they carried into battle the very thing the enemy could not imagine: courage born of perseverance, precision honed through relentless training, and a determination to prove themselves against every expectation. They were about to demonstrate that skill, bravery, and resilience are not measured by color, but by heart. Even on the eve of their first engagement, tension ran high. The men could hear rumors of formidable German tanks ahead. They knew the battles would be brutal, with high casualties and little margin for error. Yet, as they climbed into their tanks, checked their guns, and revved their engines, a quiet confidence settled over them. They were ready to face the enemy, not as the soldiers that others expected them to be, but as the soldiers they had trained to become. Every tank, every crew member, every decision mattered. The world would soon witness a transformation. The battalion that had been mocked, underestimated, and dismissed would become a force that even the most hardened German soldiers would fear. This was the beginning of a story about courage under fire, skill in the face of doubt, and defiance against the limitations imposed by society. The 761st Tank Battalion was not just fighting for victory on the battlefield. They were fighting for respect, recognition, and a place in history. The Germans had laughed at them. The doubters at home had dismissed them. But in the days to come, the Black Panthers would show that their steel and courage were stronger than the prejudices around them. Every shell fired, every maneuver executed, and every town liberated would be a testament to the power of determination against all odds. The stage was set, the tanks were rolling, and the men of the 761st Tank Battalion were about to enter the crucible of war. What happened next would not only change the course of battles in Europe but would also challenge the world's assumptions about race, bravery, and the unbreakable spirit of soldiers determined to make their mark. Before the 761st Tank Battalion ever faced a single German soldier, their real battle began in the training grounds of Fort Knox, Kentucky. It was 1942, and the United States Army had reluctantly agreed to form an all-black armored unit. Segregation was the law of the land, and black soldiers were often assigned menial or support roles. Many in the Army doubted whether black men could operate complex machinery, lead attacks, or endure the rigors of frontline combat. The 761st would not only have to prove themselves to the enemy abroad but to their own superiors at home. Every day at Fort Knox, the men were reminded that the world around them questioned their ability to succeed. The training was grueling. The battalion learned to operate the M4 Sherman tank, a machine that required precise coordination between its 5 crew members. Each tank was a small, moving fortress, but its effectiveness depended entirely on the teamwork of its commander, gunner, loader, driver, and assistant driver. The men drilled endlessly on gunnery, navigation, and battlefield tactics. They learned to read maps under pressure, coordinate maneuvers in tight formations, and react instantly to simulated enemy fire. Every error could mean disaster, and the instructors were unforgiving. Yet the Black Panthers responded with determination. They absorbed lessons quickly, adapted to challenges, and developed a fluid teamwork that became their greatest strength. Life at Fort Knox was also a test of endurance and discipline. The men faced harsh weather, exhausting physical drills, and the constant stress of proving themselves in a racially divided army. Officers often assumed they were inferior, and any mistake was magnified. But in the midst of this skepticism, the battalion developed a culture of resilience. They pushed each other to be faster, smarter, and more precise. Camaraderie became their shield against prejudice. Late at night, after grueling drills, they shared stories, encouraged one another, and imagined the day they would show the world their true potential. Each tank crew became more than a team, they became a brotherhood. The 761SD's training also emphasized aggressive tactics, a principle that would define them under General Patton's command. They learned to exploit enemy weaknesses, to attack with speed and precision, and to maintain initiative even in chaotic situations. Every exercise, every mock battle, and every obstacle course was designed to test not only skill but nerve. The battalion excelled under pressure. Commanders who had doubted them began to notice. "These men are sharp," some remarked quietly. "They move like seasoned veterans, not raw recruits." Despite the prejudices that lingered, the Black Panthers were building a reputation for excellence that could not be ignored. Yet training was not without tragedy and challenge. Accidents happened, equipment failed, and morale was tested. Some men struggled with the mental strain of long hours and the awareness that their country did not yet fully respect them. But each setback became a lesson, and each hardship forged their resolve. The battalion's motto, "Come out fighting," was more than words, it was a guiding principle that shaped their identity. They were determined to confront both the enemy and the doubt surrounding them with unwavering courage. By the time they completed training, the 761st Tank Battalion was a transformed unit. They had evolved from a group of young men facing skepticism into a disciplined, agile, and fearless armored force. Their tanks were not only machines, they were extensions of their skill, teamwork, and indomitable spirit. Officers who had once doubted them now recognized that these men were capable of facing any challenge on the battlefield. The Black Panthers were ready. As they prepared to deploy to Europe in late 1944, the men carried not only tanks and weapons but a quiet determination to prove themselves. They knew the world expected them to fail, both because of their race and because of the unprecedented challenges of tank warfare. But the 761st had been forged in fire long before they ever crossed the Atlantic. Every drill, every challenge, every long day at Fort Knox had prepared them for the ultimate test, to fight in Europe and show that courage, skill, and teamwork are not limited by color. The stage was set for their first encounter with the German army, where mockery and doubt awaited them. What the world did not yet realize was that these young black tankers were not only trained, they were unstoppable when united, and they would soon etch their names into history. The journey of the 761st Tank Battalion to Europe was more than a mere crossing of the Atlantic. It was a voyage into uncertainty, danger, and destiny. In November 1944, the battalion boarded troop ships in the United States, leaving behind families, friends, and a country that had yet to recognize their courage. As the massive vessels sliced through the icy waters of the North Atlantic, the men of the 761st faced not only the threat of German U-boats, but also the weight of history pressing on their shoulders. They carried tanks and ammunition, but more importantly, they carried the unspoken determination to prove themselves in a war that seemed indifferent to their value. Each wave that rocked the ship reminded them that the battles ahead would test everything they had learned at Fort Knox. Upon arrival in France, the Black Panthers encountered a Europe that was both alien and devastated. Cities were flattened by relentless bombings, villages burned to the ground, and fields scarred by years of warfare stretched endlessly before them. The battalion's first orders placed them under General George S. Patton's Third Army, known for aggressive maneuvers and rapid advances. Patton's reputation for demanding excellence would be a test unlike any they had faced during training. The general did not tolerate hesitation or mistakes. For the 761st, this meant adapting quickly to the chaos of real combat, while simultaneously overcoming the prejudice that lingered even among their own superiors. Skepticism greeted them at every turn. Allied officers questioned whether these black tank crews could handle frontline operations. Some doubted they had the nerve for prolonged combat, others questioned their ability to coordinate under fire. The Germans, too, were initially dismissive. Rumors of black American soldiers circulating among enemy ranks were met with derision. They assumed the 761st would crumble under pressure, imagining that racism at home would translate into fear on the battlefield. But the Black Panthers carried with them a quiet confidence forged through months of grueling preparation. Every maneuver drilled at Fort Knox, every long night spent mastering tank operations, and had readied them for this moment. The first days in France were a lesson in the harsh realities of modern warfare. The battalion's tanks, formidable machines in theory, had to navigate terrain filled with hidden obstacles, mud, and shell-cratered roads. Supply lines were stretched thin, and communication often broke down under the stress of rapid advances. Yet, the men adapted quickly. They refined coordination between tanks and infantry, learned to exploit terrain to their advantage, and began to anticipate enemy tactics. Every successful maneuver bolstered their confidence, and challenged the assumptions of both allies and enemies. What others saw as inexperience, the Black Panthers turned into ingenuity and daring. Morale was tested not only by combat conditions but also by the knowledge of the discrimination they faced at home. Letters from loved ones reminded them that while they were fighting for freedom abroad, their own country still treated them as second-class citizens. Segregation was the law, and prejudices the norm. Yet, instead of breaking their resolve, this reality strengthened it. The battalion understood that every victory on the battlefield would serve as proof of their worth, not just to the world, but to a nation struggling with its own conscience. Their tanks became symbols of defiance, courage, and determination. By the time the 761st reached the front lines, they had transformed from a battalion of recruits into a cohesive fighting force. They carried the weight of expectation, ridicule, and history, but also a fierce determination to succeed. German soldiers still underestimated them, but the Black Panthers were ready to confront that disbelief head-on. Their deployment to Europe was not just a step into enemy territory. It was a step toward changing the perception of black soldiers in the army and challenging the world's assumptions about race, bravery, and resilience. As they prepared for their first major engagements, the tension among the men was palpable. Every tank checked, every gun calibrated, every crew member mentally rehearsing maneuvers. These small acts carried the gravity of the battles ahead. The 761st was about to enter a European theater scarred by years of war, facing an enemy confident in their superiority. Yet the Black Panthers were undeterred. They had trained for this, endured for this, and now they were ready to show that courage, skill, and determination could overcome even the most entrenched doubts and the fiercest opposition. The 761st Tank Battalion's first encounter with German forces was a baptism by fire, a test that would define their reputation and prove their training was more than theoretical. In late November 1944, the battalion advanced into the Alsace region of France, a landscape scarred by war, with villages in ruins and fields riddled with trenches and mines. The Germans were entrenched, experienced, and confident, believing that these black American tankers would falter under the pressure of real combat. The men of the 761st, however, carried more than weapons. They carried months of preparation, the strength of brotherhood, and a resolve forged in the crucible of discrimination. Every tank rumbling forward was not just a machine, it was a statement against prejudice, both abroad and at home. The first engagement was tense and chaotic. The battalion's tanks moved cautiously through narrow roads, aware that German anti-tank weapons, mines, and artillery could strike at any moment. Visibility was limited, and the winter cold bit through their uniforms, reminding them that they faced not only human enemies but the unforgiving elements. Communication between tanks was critical. A single misstep could expose them to devastating counterattacks. Yet the crews executed their maneuvers with precision, each member performing their role flawlessly. The gunner tracked targets with steady hands, the driver navigated treacherous terrain, and the loader ensured a constant stream of ammunition. Coordination, trust, and nerves of steel were the only things standing between them and disaster. As the battle unfolded, German soldiers were quick to realize they had underestimated their opponents. Tanks that were meant to falter pressed forward with unrelenting speed. The 761st struck with efficiency and boldness, flanking enemy positions and taking out fortified guns. The Panthers demonstrated a mastery of combined arms tactics, working seamlessly with infantry to breach defensive lines. Each successful strike not only inflicted damage, but also shattered the illusion that black soldiers were somehow less capable than their white counterparts. Allies watching from nearby units could not help but be impressed, while the Germans began to confront the frightening reality that they were facing a disciplined and relentless armored force. Despite the early successes, the battalion suffered its share of setbacks. Tanks were disabled by mines, crews were wounded, and the chaos of battle tested even the most seasoned soldiers. Yet, rather than retreat, the men adapted. They learned to anticipate German tactics, coordinate repairs under fire, and maintain offensive momentum even under extreme pressure. Their resilience was as remarkable as their skill. For the first time, the myth of black inferiority in combat began to crumble, not because anyone wanted it to, but because the evidence on the battlefield was undeniable. Individual acts of heroism began to emerge almost immediately. Tank commanders made split-second decisions that saved entire crews. Drivers maneuvered through deadly terrain to rescue stranded comrades. Gunners and loaders fought through exhaustion and fear, maintaining relentless pressure on the enemy. Every small victory mattered, and each success built the battalion's confidence. These moments, while sometimes overlooked in larger battle reports, forged a reputation that would spread quickly among both Allied and German forces. The 761st was no longer just another unit. They were a force to be reckoned with. By the end of their first engagements in Alsace, the 761st had not only proven their skill but also begun to earn the respect they had long been denied. They had faced the enemy under fire, demonstrated courage and tactical brilliance, and shown that training and determination could overcome the skepticism and prejudice that had followed them from Fort Knox to Europe. The Germans who had mocked them were now cautious, and the Allied commanders who had doubted them began to acknowledge the battalion's effectiveness. The Black Panthers had survived their initiation into combat, and in doing so, they had begun to rewrite the narrative of what black soldiers could achieve on the battlefield. This first taste of real combat also revealed a crucial truth to the men of the 761st. Bravery alone was not enough. They needed discipline, coordination, and the ability to act decisively under extreme stress. Their success would depend not only on their weapons but on their ability to think, communicate, and trust one another in the chaos of battle. The lessons learned in these early engagements would shape their actions in the grueling campaigns ahead, from the forests of Hurtgen to the icy roads of the Battle of the Bulge. Every victory, every maneuver, and every act of courage built the foundation for the legendary reputation they were about to earn. The 761st Tank Battalion had arrived in Europe as a unit doubted and mocked. Within the first days of combat, they began transforming skepticism into awe. The Germans had expected to face soldiers who would falter under fire. Instead, they confronted a relentless armored force that moved with precision, fought with determination, and refused to yield. The Black Panthers were no longer simply a battalion of black soldiers. They were a symbol of defiance, skill, and courage, ready to take the war to the enemy and prove the world wrong. As the 761st Tank Battalion continued their advance through Europe, a quiet transformation was underway. The same soldiers who had been doubted at Fort Knox, laughed at by their own countrymen, and mocked by the enemy were now beginning to earn a reputation that would shock both allies and adversaries. Every engagement strengthened their skills, every successful maneuver under fire reinforced their confidence, and every victory chipped away at the walls of prejudice that had followed them from America to the battlefields of France. The Germans who had expected to face a faltering, inexperienced unit were instead confronted with precision, courage, and determination they could not ignore. The 761st was proving, decisively, that ability and bravery are not measured by race. Under the command of General George S. Patton, known for his relentless pursuit of victory, the battalion became an essential part of the Third Army's operations. Patton demanded speed, initiative, and bold action, and the Black Panthers responded in ways that exceeded expectations. Tanks moved swiftly to flank entrenched positions, coordinated strikes with infantry units neutralized fortified enemy defenses, and crews executed complex battlefield maneuvers with exceptional skill. Stories began to circulate among other Allied units of the Black Tankers' daring raids and effective firepower. Soldiers who had once doubted them were now watching closely, often with a mixture of astonishment and respect. The Germans, meanwhile, were beginning to take notice. Reports of American tanks breaking through defenses with remarkable efficiency and fearlessness reached enemy officers at the front. The initial mockery and dismissal slowly turned into concern, and in some cases, outright fear. The Black Panthers' presence was no longer a novelty, it was a threat. Enemy commanders realized that the men they had underestimated were disciplined, relentless, and capable of exploiting every tactical advantage. Each day in combat, each destroyed enemy gun position, and each liberated village reinforced this growing reputation. The 761st also became known for their adaptability in the field. Unlike many units, they could operate under extreme conditions, whether navigating through frozen roads, mud-choked fields, or dense forests. They handled damaged equipment, countered ambushes, and coordinated attacks under the most chaotic circumstances. Their resilience inspired other units around them, proving that courage, training, and teamwork could overcome even the most dangerous and unpredictable situations. In the eyes of allies and enemies alike, the battalion was no longer defined by the color of its soldiers, but by the precision and effectiveness of its actions. Individual acts of heroism further elevated their standing. Tank commanders risked their lives to lead assaults, gunners destroyed enemy fortifications with pinpoint accuracy, and loaders and drivers performed under fire with remarkable skill. One soldier's bold decision to push through a narrow pass while under artillery fire saved an entire company of infantry, and word of such actions spread quickly across the front lines. These deeds were more than tactical victories. They were proof that black soldiers could fight, lead, and excel under the most extreme circumstances. Back home, the battalion's growing reputation remained largely unknown due to segregation and discriminatory reporting, yet their accomplishments began to resonate within military circles. Officers who had previously doubted their capability were now recognizing that the 761st could be counted on in the most critical operations. For the men themselves, this acknowledgement, however limited, became a powerful motivator. Every battle was not only a fight against the enemy, but also a fight against the prejudices that had long sought to define them. Their courage and skill began to redefine the narrative of black soldiers in the U.S. Army. By the time the battalion approached the forests of Hurtgen and the icy roads of the Ardennes, the Black Panthers were no longer a mere curiosity. They were an established, respected, and feared fighting force. Germans who had once mocked them were now wary, reassessing their expectations, and preparing for the unexpected. Allies, too, recognized that the 761st was capable of extraordinary feats of combat, often taking on missions that required speed, precision, and audacity. With every engagement, the battalion shattered stereotypes, proving that prejudice and doubt could not stand in the face of determination, skill, and relentless courage. The rise of the 761st Tank Battalion's reputation was not only a story of battlefield success but also a story of resilience, perseverance, and defiance. They had been underestimated, laughed at, and marginalized. Yet, through their actions, they challenged every assumption about what black soldiers could achieve in combat. By breaking through both enemy lines and societal expectations, the Black Panthers began to carve a place for themselves in the history of World War II, leaving a legacy that would inspire generations to come. The true test of the 761st Tank Battalion came in the winter of 1944, as they entered the infamous Hurtgen Forest and later faced the chaotic fury of the Battle of the Bulge. The forests of Hurtgen were a nightmare for any armored unit. Dense trees blocked sight lines, narrow trails limited maneuverability, and the ground was churned into mud by artillery fire and freezing rain. Mines and hidden German positions turned every advance into a deadly gamble. For the 761st, this was not just a test of skill, it was a trial of endurance, teamwork, and courage. The Germans expected to catch the Black Panthers off guard, but what they encountered was a battalion trained to adapt and fight relentlessly, no matter the odds. In Hurtgen, visibility was often so poor that tank crews could barely see a few meters ahead. Artillery shells screamed overhead, exploding around their tanks, sending shrapnel flying and rattling steel plates. Ambushes by German panzers and anti-tank guns forced the Black Panthers to make split-second decisions, maneuvering through narrow gaps to survive. Crews worked tirelessly, often for hours without rest, coordinating their movements while under fire. Each successful advance required a combination of courage, communication, and ingenuity. They learned to use the terrain to their advantage, striking from unexpected angles and retreating strategically when necessary. The forest became a crucible, forging the battalion into a force capable of surviving the most unforgiving conditions. The psychological strain was immense. The freezing cold, exhaustion, and constant threat of death tested every soldier's resolve. Yet the men of the 761st refused to yield. The knowledge that they were fighting not only for victory but also to prove their worth against long-standing prejudice pushed them forward. The Germans' initial dismissiveness gave way to fear and respect as the Black Panthers repeatedly broke through entrenched positions and destroyed enemy fortifications. Their reputation for daring, precision, and relentlessness began to spread across the battlefield, marking the battalion as a unit that could not be ignored. When the battalion was redirected to the Battle of the Bulge in December 1944, the intensity reached an entirely new level. The German offensive caught Allied forces by surprise, creating chaos along the front lines. Snow-covered roads became treacherous, and communication lines were disrupted, making coordination between units difficult. The 761st was called into action to hold critical positions, rescue encircled infantry, and counterattack advancing German forces. Each mission demanded speed, decisiveness, and a willingness to take risks. Tank crews moved through narrow passes and icy roads, engaging in fierce firefights with enemy armor and infantry, often under heavy artillery bombardment. The battalion's actions during this period were nothing short of heroic. Crews performed daring flanking maneuvers to break through German lines, rescuing beleaguered Allied units and preventing further advances by the enemy. Instances of individual bravery emerged repeatedly, commanders making split-second choices to save their crews, gunners destroying multiple enemy tanks in a single engagement, and drivers navigating near impossible terrain to maintain momentum. Each successful action reinforced their reputation as one of the most capable and fearless armored units in Patton's Third Army. Despite the chaos and danger, the Black Panthers maintained cohesion and discipline. Their success in the Hurtgen Forest and the Ardennes was not due to luck. It was the result of rigorous training, relentless practice, and unshakable determination. Even when facing superior German forces or harsh winter conditions, the battalion adapted and overcame. Their ability to operate effectively under pressure astonished both allies and enemies, and the tales of their bravery quickly spread throughout the army. By the end of these pivotal battles, the 761st had solidified its status as an elite unit. They had endured some of the harshest combat conditions of the war, faced relentless enemy attacks, and continued to advance despite fatigue, injuries, and mechanical failures. The Germans who had once mocked them now regarded them with respect and caution. The Black Panthers had proven, beyond any doubt, that their courage, skill, and resolve were unmatched. The Hurtgen Forest and the Battle of the Bulge were more than tactical victories. They were a turning point in the battalion's story. These battles demonstrated that the 761st Tank Battalion was not just a segregated unit trying to survive. They were a disciplined, fearless, and indispensable force capable of taking on the most formidable enemy positions. Their actions shattered stereotypes and established a legacy that would inspire generations of soldiers and civilians alike. Amid the chaos of battle, the individual courage of the 761st Tank Battalion shone brightest. The forests, snow-covered roads, and shattered towns of Europe were unforgiving, and yet the men of the Black Panthers consistently displayed acts of heroism that would etch their names into history. Every soldier understood that their mission was more than just a military operation. It was a personal testament to their skill, resilience, and determination to prove that race did not define capability. In the midst of relentless fire, explosions, and the constant threat of death, tank crews acted with precision and bravery that inspired awe in allies and struck fear into the Germans. Some acts of valor were remarkable for their audacity. Tank commanders, confronted with entrenched German positions, made split-second decisions to charge forward despite overwhelming odds. One commander, recognizing a trapped infantry unit pinned down by enemy fire, maneuvered his tank through a narrow corridor of debris and mines to provide cover, allowing the soldiers to escape unharmed. Gunners took calculated risks, lining up shots through the chaos of trees, mud, and smoke, often destroying enemy armor with astonishing accuracy. Loaders and drivers worked tirelessly under fire, ensuring the tanks remained operational even when hit or damaged. Each crew member's action could mean the difference between life and death, and the 761st consistently rose to the occasion. The battalion's heroism was not limited to individual feats. As a unit, they displayed extraordinary coordination and tactical brilliance. During assaults on fortified towns, they combined mobility, firepower, and communication to breach defenses that many believed would hold for weeks. When facing superior German armor, they executed flanking maneuvers and ambush tactics with remarkable efficiency, often turning seemingly desperate situations into victories. These operations demonstrated not only courage but also an exceptional understanding of armored warfare, honed through months of grueling training at Fort Knox and tempered in the fires of combat. Recognition for these acts came in various forms, though it was often delayed by the segregation and racial prejudice that permeated the U.S. Army at the time. The battalion earned the respect of Patton himself, who recognized their effectiveness and tenacity. Individual soldiers received Distinguished Service Crosses, Silver Stars, and Bronze Stars for extraordinary bravery. These awards were acknowledgments of acts that went far beyond the call of duty, rescuing stranded units under fire, destroying enemy tanks, and leading attacks that broke through heavily fortified positions. Each medal was not just an honor but a symbol of defiance against the discrimination they had faced throughout their lives. Stories of heroism spread quickly through the ranks. Allies began to see the 761st not as a segregated curiosity, but as a vital and dependable combat force. Even the Germans began to recognize their skill and fearlessness. Reports circulated of American black tankers who refused to yield under fire, who attacked with precision and intelligence, and who consistently emerged victorious despite being outnumbered or outgunned. The battalion's growing reputation made the enemy wary and forced commanders on both sides to take them seriously. What had once been mockery transformed into respect and, in some cases, apprehension. The impact of these heroic actions went beyond the battlefield. Letters sent home by soldiers reflected a quiet pride and an understanding of the significance of their service. They were fighting not only to defeat the enemy but also to challenge the entrenched racial prejudices of their own country. Their courage in Europe contrasted sharply with the discrimination and segregation they faced back home. Each successful mission and every recognized act of bravery contributed to a growing narrative. The 761st Tank Battalion was proving that black soldiers could perform at the highest level of military excellence, even in the most brutal conditions. By the end of 1944, the battalion had built a record of heroism and effectiveness that few units could match. They had faced some of the most grueling combat in the European theater, from icy roads and forest ambushes to heavily fortified towns and relentless enemy fire. Every act of bravery, from individual deeds to coordinated assaults, strengthened their reputation and cemented their legacy. The 761st Tank Battalion had not only survived, they had excelled, proving their courage, skill, and determination in a way that history would remember. The battalion's recognition was not just about medals and commendations, it was about rewriting the narrative. Each heroic act was a strike against the prejudice that had sought to define them, a challenge to anyone who doubted their capability, and a lasting testament to the bravery of black soldiers in World War II. Their courage on the battlefield was undeniable, their skill unmatched, and their determination unbreakable. The 761st Tank Battalion had proven, once and for all, that they belonged in the fight and that their valor would not be ignored. While the 761st Tank Battalion earned respect on the battlefields of Europe, the reality they returned to in letters, memories, and fleeting thoughts was starkly different. Even as they destroyed German defenses, liberated towns, and performed feats of heroism under fire, many of these men knew that at home, they were still considered second-class citizens. Segregation was the law in much of America. Jim Crow dictated life in the South, and racism permeated institutions across the nation. Soldiers rode home with a mixture of pride and frustration, describing how they were celebrated abroad for bravery that would not be fully recognized in their own country. The contrast was painful. In Europe, they earned the Germans' fear and the Allies' respect. Back home, they faced doubt, prejudice, and the rigid walls of discrimination. The disbelief was not confined to civilians. Some Allied commanders were initially skeptical of the battalion's capabilities, expecting that a segregated unit would falter under pressure. Letters and reports show that doubts lingered even as the Black Panthers continued to perform brilliantly in combat. They faced scrutiny on every maneuver, every mission, and every engagement. For every victory they achieved, there were whispers questioning whether they were lucky or whether the results could be sustained. This constant doubt weighed on the soldiers, yet they responded with focus and determination, knowing that each success was a statement against both enemy forces and entrenched prejudice. Meanwhile, the Germans also adjusted their perception. The initial ridicule of black American soldiers shifted to caution and even fear. Enemy officers reported encountering a tank battalion that was fearless, disciplined, and tactically brilliant. Units that had laughed at the idea of facing black tank crews now faced the reality of a fighting force that would relentlessly pursue objectives, coordinate complex maneuvers, and endure grueling conditions without hesitation. By combining aggression with skill, the 761st shattered the stereotypes that had been imposed upon them. Every town they liberated, every enemy position they destroyed, and every convoy they protected served as evidence of their remarkable capability. The psychological toll of this dual reality, celebrated in Europe yet marginalized at home, was immense. Soldiers endured long hours under fire, navigated treacherous terrain, and risked their lives daily. And yet, the weight of systemic racism added an invisible burden. Letters reveal that many men grappled with the knowledge that even after surviving combat and performing heroically, they might return to a society that would deny them full recognition. This tension became a quiet motivator, driving the battalion to push harder, fight smarter, and prove their worth beyond question. Each mission became more than a tactical objective, it became a statement about dignity, equality, and human capability. Despite these challenges, the battalion's cohesion and morale remained unshakable. They relied on one another, drawing strength from shared experiences and mutual trust. Younger soldiers looked up to veterans who had survived ambushes, rescued infantry under fire, and endured endless hours of tension without breaking. Officers, once skeptical, began to place full confidence in the battalion's abilities, relying on them for critical missions that required initiative, courage, and skill. Their performance gradually shifted perceptions, demonstrating that competence and bravery were not determined by skin color but by training, discipline, and resolve. Letters home often revealed the duality of their experience, pride in their accomplishments mixed with frustration over the continued inequities they faced. Some soldiers wrote about receiving praise from European civilians and fellow Allied troops, yet returning to a country that questioned their place in the military hierarchy. This contrast highlighted the deeply ingrained racial barriers in America, even as the 761 SD's combat record made it impossible for anyone to deny their effectiveness. The battalion became a symbol, not only of military skill but of the struggle against prejudice that black soldiers endured both abroad and at home. Through all this, the 761st Tank Battalion never wavered in their commitment to the mission. They fought with courage, precision, and audacity, knowing that every victory undermined both enemy confidence and societal prejudice. Each German unit they engaged, each town they liberated, and each convoy they protected was a statement. Black soldiers were not only capable of facing the fiercest enemy, they could excel under conditions that would test even the most seasoned troops. By maintaining excellence in combat while confronting disbelief on both sides of the Atlantic, the 761st set a precedent that would influence military policy and challenge entrenched social norms for decades to come. The dual struggle of facing racism at home while commanding respect abroad became a defining feature of the 761 SD's story. They were not fighting only for territory or victory. They were fighting to prove that valor, skill, and determination transcend race. In doing so, they built a legacy that would be remembered as much for its courage against prejudice as for its battlefield successes. By the time the Black Panthers returned to towns along the front, they had reshaped the perception of what African American soldiers could accomplish, leaving both enemies and allies in no doubt of their ability and their resolve. By early 1945, the 761st Tank Battalion had earned a reputation that preceded them. Allied commanders trusted them for the most dangerous assignments, and German forces had learned to fear them. Yet, the most critical tests were still ahead. The final push into the heart of Germany would demand everything the Black Panthers had learned through months of relentless combat. They faced heavily fortified towns, entrenched enemy positions, and a stubborn adversary determined to hold their ground. The battalion's training, teamwork, and courage would be pushed to the limit, and the outcome would cement their legacy as one of the most formidable units of World War II. The terrain was treacherous. Bombed-out roads, rubble-strewn towns, and icy fields slowed the advance, leaving tanks vulnerable to ambushes. German defenders were experienced, disciplined, and well-armed. Anti-tank guns, hidden artillery, and panzer divisions lay in wait, ready to punish any mistake. But the 761st approached the challenge with the precision and audacity that had become their hallmark. They combined speed, tactical intelligence, and relentless aggression to break through defensive lines that many units would have considered impenetrable. Each maneuver, each advance, and each decision carried enormous risk, yet the battalion executed them with unshakable resolve. In many towns, the Black Panthers faced house-to-house fighting. Infantry units moved alongside the tanks, clearing streets while the armored crews provided crucial support. The coordination required was immense. Tank commanders had to read the battlefield in real time, gunners aimed with deadly accuracy under constant fire, and drivers navigated narrow alleys and destroyed roads. Every engagement tested their training, instincts, and nerve. Casualties occurred, tanks were damaged or destroyed, but the battalion never faltered. Their resilience under fire became legendary, earning admiration from fellow Allied soldiers who witnessed their fearlessness firsthand. The German defenders, who had mocked those months earlier, now confronted a very different reality. Reports of the Black Panthers' relentless assaults circulated among enemy units, and commanders realized they faced an opponent who combined strategic skill with unparalleled courage. The 761st did not hesitate. They spearheaded assaults, destroyed fortified positions, and helped secure critical routes for Patton's advancing forces. Their effectiveness was undeniable, and their audacity inspired others while demoralizing the enemy. What had once been derision transformed into respect and even fear. Individual acts of heroism continued to stand out during this final push. Crews rescued stranded infantry under fire, neutralized enemy positions single-handedly, and made split-second decisions that saved lives and secured victories. One tank commander, maneuvering through a narrow street under heavy artillery fire, managed to disable a German tank threatening an Allied supply column. A gunner, exposed to enemy fire, accurately destroyed multiple machine gun nests, allowing infantry to advance safely. These moments were repeated across the battalion, a testament to their training, courage, and indomitable will. By the time the 761st reached the German heartland, their record of accomplishment was undeniable. They had survived months of continuous combat, including the brutal forests of Hurtgen, the freezing roads of the Ardennes, and now the fortified towns of central Germany. Their tanks had broken through enemy defenses time and again, their crews had earned a reputation for audacity and skill, and their determination had challenged the prejudices that had shadowed them since their formation. Every German soldier they faced knew that the Black Panthers were not to be underestimated. The final push also demonstrated the battalion's leadership and cohesion under extreme pressure. Crew members depended on each other for survival, and the bond forged in the crucible of battle was unbreakable. Communication, trust, and discipline allowed the unit to maintain momentum despite intense resistance and harsh conditions. Their effectiveness on the battlefield became a symbol of what could be achieved when determination met skill, and when prejudice was replaced by performance and courage. As towns fell and German resistance crumbled, the 761st Tank Battalion emerged not just as victors but as legends. They had shattered fortified defenses, overcome near-impossible obstacles, and demonstrated that courage, training, and unity could overcome any challenge. The Germans who had once mocked them were now in awe, and their fellow allies had witnessed their extraordinary capability firsthand. The battalion had proven that they belonged not only on the front lines but in history itself, leaving a legacy that would resonate long after the war's end. The final push of the 761st Tank Battalion was more than a military achievement. It was a statement against prejudice, a testament to resilience, and an enduring symbol of the power of determination. They had fought battles that tested their skill, courage, and resolve, and in every engagement they had triumphed. By breaking through the enemy's defenses and earning respect from friend and foe alike, the Black Panthers cemented their place as one of World War II's most extraordinary units. When the guns finally fell silent across Europe, the 761st Tank Battalion had proven itself beyond doubt. They had fought continuously for 183 days, enduring the harshest conditions, the fiercest enemies, and the weight of prejudice that had followed them from the United States to the battlefields of France and Germany. The men of the Black Panthers had faced forests riddled with mines, frozen roads under relentless artillery, and fortified towns that tested the limits of both man and machine. They had survived, triumphed, and in doing so, had rewritten the narrative of what African American soldiers could achieve in World War II. Their actions were not simply a military accomplishment, they were a statement of courage, resilience, and equality in the face of overwhelming doubt. Returning home was a complicated victory. In Europe, the 761st had earned respect and recognition. Germans feared them, Allied soldiers relied on them, and military commanders acknowledged their skill and effectiveness. Yet the same country that had drafted them, trained them, and sent them into combat still treated them as second-class citizens. Segregation was still in force, Jim Crow laws persisted in the South, and racial prejudice limited opportunities for recognition and advancement. Many of the men returned to a society that failed to honor the very heroism that had kept American forces moving and saved countless lives on the front lines. Letters and personal accounts reveal a mixture of pride in their accomplishments and frustration at the continued injustice at home. Despite these challenges, the 761st's legacy endured. Their combat record demonstrated extraordinary skill, bravery, and teamwork. Soldiers had taken on seemingly impossible missions, executed daring maneuvers, and repeatedly proven their ability to operate effectively under the most punishing conditions. The battalion became a model of excellence for armored warfare, showing that discipline, training, and determination could overcome both enemy forces and systemic prejudice. Their record of 183 consecutive days in battle under General Patton's command, often in direct confrontation with elite German units, remains one of the most impressive in U.S. military history. The recognition they did receive, though limited at the time, included Distinguished Service Crosses, Silver Stars, and Bronze Stars awarded to individual soldiers for acts of exceptional bravery. These awards acknowledged the countless moments of heroism, from rescuing trapped infantry under fire to destroying heavily fortified enemy positions against overwhelming odds. But the true recognition came from the impact they had on the broader military and on history itself. By proving their capability under the harshest conditions, the 761st Tank Battalion challenged the assumptions of commanders, soldiers, and civilians alike. They showed that bravery and skill are universal qualities, unbound by race or background. The legacy of the Black Panthers extended far beyond World War II. Their achievements laid the groundwork for the eventual desegregation of the U.S. Army, influencing military policy and inspiring generations of African American soldiers who would follow in their footsteps. Their story became a symbol of resilience, determination, and the fight for equality both on the battlefield and in society. Historians, including Kareem Abdul-Jabbar and Brothers in Arms, have highlighted the 761st as a unit that not only shaped the outcome of key battles but also challenged deeply ingrained societal prejudices, proving that courage and excellence transcend color. Even today, the story of the 761st Tank Battalion resonates. It is remembered not just for tactical victories or heroic acts but for the profound statement it made about human potential and dignity. The soldiers who endured mockery, disbelief, and systemic racism, and who then went on to break through enemy defenses and earn the respect of the world, embody a legacy of perseverance that continues to inspire. Their courage reminds us that true heroism is measured not only by victories on the battlefield but by the strength to overcome prejudice and adversity in all its forms. The Black Panthers' journey from doubted recruits to legendary warriors illustrates the transformative power of determination and excellence. They shattered stereotypes, earned respect from friend and foe alike, and left a mark on history that cannot be erased. The 761st Tank Battalion's story is more than a tale of combat. It is a testament to human courage, resilience, and the unbreakable spirit of soldiers determined to prove their worth against every expectation. In the annals of World War II, their name stands as a symbol of valor, equality, and the enduring power of perseverance.